Hello and welcome to the final part of our summer draft and sew along. A whole session to see how did these two styles work out, what I love about them, what are the limitations of these sort of methods, and of course I'm going to share some of your versions you've made. So thank you for those of you who send it in. If you haven't yet, you can always still tag me on Instagram or email me, and I will make sure to share it with the world. If you're watching live, do say hello in the chat, and of course you can also ask any questions you might have. I've already got a few questions people sent me, so I'm going to answer them as well. And of course, if it's your first time watching, very welcome. My name is Charlotte. I'm a fashion designer, pattern cutter and teacher, and on this channel I share my love for vintage pattern cutting, how to make your own clothes, and how to make a wardrobe which really is you rather than somebody else's. So lovely to have you all on here. And hello Natalie in the chat, and hello Suzanne, and hello Astrid. Lovely to have all of you. And I've got images of some of you, so that'd be great. I'm looking really forward to sharing all your blouses and tunic. And hello Heike as well, another one who actually took part. So yeah, thank you so much for taking part of it. It's always like, will anybody like it? So I'm really grateful that you all sent me your images and that you took part and enjoyed it. And I know Suzanne already shared in the email that it didn't work out, which I actually thought was really helpful. So I'm going to share it with you later. And why this method, for example, didn't work for Suzanne. And that's the sort of limitations of these styles. So to begin with, let me show you the two styles. I'm wearing, of course, the blouse. I'm going to stand up and do a little twirl. So this is not a copy of the original. I'm going to put it on in a second so you can see the differences. What I did used I think it's an old curtain fabric. I drafted it myself. I used my own measurements to make like a made to measure version of the blouse. And let's have a twirl. So you can see I changed the sleeves. So instead of gathering, I actually left them loose. I also didn't make the bodice and the sleeves as voluminous as the original. I'm going to show you the comparison in a second, which is quite interesting because I quite like how this looks. However, what is really noticeable, because there's less volume in this blouse, the gusset stands out more. Can you see if I arrange it carefully, the sleeves sit really nice, but if I turn round, can you see there's a little bit of a drag, and that's because I think I could do with a bit more volume in the blouse. And on paper it looked like nice. It's like my hip measurement plus a bit extra, so it should be fine. But it is the sort of, because of course I go round body, so it's basically dragging a little bit. So next time I probably add a little bit more volume. I think maybe 5 centimeters, 2 inches to the front and to the back, and that will sort of basically allow the gusset to do the work underneath my arms without it dragging to the front. So that was a really interesting learning curve, because this is like a twirl. Because I had the original, I made a very similar version, just slightly different measurements to my own measurements. So it's really interesting how slight changes in from a lot of volume to still quite a nice amount of volume really change the look. You might not see it, but I really noticed it. And I think also again with the blouse here, if I have a little bit more volume, because this, I'm not a big sleeve person, I thought, oh, that's actually a really nice subtle amount of volume. But I think again, if I had just sort of 5 centimeters, 10 centimeters more, then it would actually be able to move a bit more freely. And Natalie's saying, I love how it turned out. Thank you very much. And I think I like the overall result. It works really well. I stabilized the fabric for the straps, and then it's just got a little bit of cutout. So it's interesting, but really variable. And then Astrid is saying that's exactly what I ran into, just like making curtains. And I'm going to show you Astrid's example. because she did a different version. So she used pleats. So you can see this looks really pretty on the stand. However, when Astrid put it on, the pleats wouldn't lay flat because, again, with pleats you have a lot of fabric, of course, but of course if you move, or if it's slightly you curves, they spring open if there isn't enough room. So again, what Astrid actually had to do is add an extra side panel in, just to add the extra bit of volume so it hangs really flatly. And she's saying she hasn't done that yet, but that was the plan we worked out on the pattern cutting school, which is where I ran, if you're watching from YouTube, on the pattern cutting school I ran on with just my own website, where I share lots of pattern cutting courses, lessons, Q&As. I had a special sort of exclusive summer draft and so on, where we got into it a bit more in depth. So we discussed different questions, different versions, and our exclusive lives there, which is where we talked about Astrid's issues with it. So yes, it's really interesting, because you always think when you have so much volume, it's not all needed, but it is actually, with something like this, which is of course a really sort of old classical way of doing it. There's generations of thinking of doing something and not quite working out to arrive at that sort of perfect, most, yes, it's the most perfect toned down version of a principle which works, which gives you movement and looks good. And just by fiddling with it like I did, by reducing the volume, or what Astrid did by adding pleats instead of gathers, you think, oh, it's still the same amount of volume, or still a lot of volume, but actually the change is quite profound. And that's what I love about pattern cutting. It can be a little bit annoying if it doesn't quite work out like for Aston, but you actually really learn about what works for your body. And the great thing about making your own clothes like this, you can easily just basically add an extra triangle or an extra rectangle, and suddenly it fits again. So while it's a little bit annoying in the moment, you actually learn and from the mistake and hopefully improve it. I'm really going to pop this on just to show you the difference it makes. So if I'm quickly going to show you, so this is quite subtle, but it shows a little bit of drag marks underneath there, and I think I like a sleeve. So I'm going to quickly pop off camera. I checked out every single of my white vests recently because I thought, oh, I need to make new ones. And sometimes if I'm not drastic, it doesn't happen because I don't put the time aside. So now I really need to put the time aside just to make some nice vests. But of course it means in the meanwhile I haven't got any sort of summer vests, so I will need to make some more, which is why I had to go off camera. And Natalie said, I've had this happen many times fiddling with patterns. Yes, it's sort of, I think that's where you really learn, because you sort of think, oh, I can easily pinch that out. And then you actually really sort of understand 3D, 2D, how does that flat piece move around my body? Why do I really need that curve? And it is a bit frustrating when it happens, but most of the time, that's when I've really learned how everything functions, the sort of principles. You can't change what you can change, how you can improve it. Sometimes it's really surprising what works and stuff. And I think sometimes I overcomplicate things, and then you think, oh, could have been much easier. But it's the fun of it. And because it's fabric or paper, it's easily amendable. It's not like you're using metal poles and building houses. It's easily undone. And Astrid says, with the pattern in the fabric, which is of course my new version, you really don't notice the drag marks. I like your results. Yes, I'm being a little bit pickety. I think it's, you know, if you bought something, you wouldn't notice it. It's only because I was putting on and sort of looking at it and comparing it. So I'm going to show you this version, and that's why I sort of noticed it. You can see there I've got a little bit of drag marks again, just from the sleeves, but it's a little bit less noticeable. So this is of course longer. Let's have a look how the back compares, because I didn't look. So again, I think there's a little bit of dragging. It's just a little bit less. So I think this is perfectly, I'm happy with it. I'm not going to change it. It's just really interesting how reducing the oval width, but I think it's probably 4 inches, 10 centimeters overall, made a difference, because you think it's still a lot, it's still loose, it's not tight. Why does it make a difference? And I'm actually going to tie it up and see. And you can see, yeah, that looks nice either way. And Natalie saying different fabrics can make a difference too. So that's completely true, because this is really soft washed cotton. I think this is might be a linen. So that is a slightly, it's either linen or it's a like a very tightly woven shiny cotton. You can see it's got, well, on camera probably not, it's got a slightly more sheen, and it's also got that slight papery quality, because this is probably 100 years old, so it's, you know, cotton after a while goes a little bit dry. So yes, it's a difference. This is softer, this drapes nicely, so that's really true. But this is my result. I'm going to show you a few more, and interestingly, a lot of you chose to make this blouse as well. So let's have a look. So Heike, she started making it, but she emailed me to say that at the moment the weather in Sweden is really beautiful. So she did the first step and then just thought, it's too hot, I need to be outside, probably enjoy the weather. But I really, so this is her starting point. What I really like is how she's using a different fabric for the panel, because of this, of course, it's the same fabric but embroidered. And on here, I used the same fabric, but I mounted it, so it's again a little bit more solid. But it's still the same fabric. And what works really nice on her is how you have the graphic difference between the neckline and the bodice. And of course, I quite like it. At the moment, it looks like a summer top. And of course, if you wanted to, you could make this as a summer top. What I would do, if you don't want the sleeves, what you basically have to do, instead of a gusset going in there, I would basically curve the sides very slightly, because if you just have a slit on the sides, that's going to leave a slightly funny armhole. Again, that's something I've learned from mistakes when I've made styles I read before, that if you aren't careful, you end up with really funny drag marks. But that's something you could easily just check on your garment, is where you just stitch the side seam up to where you think it should be. You try it on, you see how it looks, and if there's too many drag marks, then you can curve it slightly or open it up a little bit more until it works for you. But that would be a really nice summer version of this style. And what would be nice about this style is when she puts the sleeve on, of course, you really got that frame, and then the sleeves in a different version. So that's a really nice version. And I think that's what I like about this blouse, is that you have that sort of it's quite good. You can have quite a lot of fun playing around with different fabrics, because you could have again a contrasting cuff and a maybe contrasting panel at the bottom. And I also think this is the one which is really a lot more beginner friendly, because of course this is tighter, more constructed, so we're going to run into problems with fitting, which Suzanne had, which I'm going to talk about later. But this one, because we're only really going to fit around here, which is really straightforward with flat pieces, because it sort of works around our body, and then the rest is really voluminous, so it's a really adaptable style for all of us. And Heike is saying, I like your blouse. I plan making sleeves to my blouse. It's really nice to wear in the hot weather. Yes, I think sleeves will look perfect, but I actually quite liked it as a sort of top. And I could imagine it being a summer dress like that with the sort of panel here, and then the um sort of a longer bodice, and then you could just gather it in at the waist or leave it loose. So it'd be quite a nice flowy summer dress. So there's lots of options, which is lovely. And Astra is saying the contrast is really fun, Heike. Yeah, I think it's a really good choice of fabrics, isn't it? She's chosen. So was Heike. Let's have a look at what else we can see. Then, of course, we had Astrid's already talked about, but let's just appreciate it rather than talking about fitting problems. So Astrid basically said the gathering wasn't really for her. She wanted maybe maybe slightly more, we sort of talking about maybe like more Japanese version, something maybe slightly different. Not as I always think gathers are quite flouncy, so this is sort of more controlled. So she chose to use pleats, and it's a really nice outcome. It's got sort of quite a vintage, quite, I thought it's got quite a naval feel. It could be quite sailory, and Astrid, I think it also reminded her of a choir gown, or it's quite an academic feel as well. You can imagine it being worn sort of at Cambridge, or again singing at the sort of King's College choir. You quite often have robes like that. So it's a really nice way of playing around. It looks completely different, but again, oh, Astrid is saying age appropriate. Um, that's yes, that's another definition for it. So there's lots of things. It's sort of different styles, isn't it? Like whether you this is quite a folksy style, isn't it? Like a sort of slightly naive style, and then I think yours is slightly maybe a bit more like smart as well. So yes, so that's what's great about it. It's again, it's the same pattern cutting method, same pattern pieces, and if you look at them next to each other, and then again if you put this up, they're all white fabric, they all look really different. And again, if you then put hikers in, it's again a completely different look. And Astrid is saying it's like an even song, smock or something. Yes, I think it's got that sort of, this is more like folksy, the Astrid's is more like sort of academic, formal, maybe is a good way. And then I think hikers is nice because it's quite romantic, but less folkloric like my original. And then the final one I wanted to show you is by, I'm not quite sure whether it's Irene, or Irene, because she is Dutch. I think so. I'm gonna embarrass myself. I'm gonna blow it up, and she made it out of a white cotton. So hers is probably the one which is, if I'm gonna go into the close-up. If you look at the close-up, this is probably the one which is most truthful to the original. This one, it's really nice, and she just used machine embroidery on her machine to do it. So if you got a modern machine, quite often they have really nice options for embroidery, and then by using different colors, like she's done, you can do some really amazing embroidery, which has the color she's chosen is really good, so it has that sort of vintage feel. And I know some of you don't like cutting up old tablecloths. I feel a bit like that. If it's basically a perfect tablecloth, it feels sort of slightly sacrilegious to cut into it, because it's these days and weeks of work. But with other stuff like this, it's got a lot. If I show you, it's got a lot of marks and folds. So I thought I would never use that. So I'm going to give it a new life that way. And both Astrid saying it's gorgeous, and Natalie saying lovely embroidery, and Heike saying that it's nice. So yeah, I think that's a sort of, the other ones like my versions, Heike's version, Esther's version, we did a little bit of fiddling or designing. So it had like new effects, new problems. But of course, the great thing is Irene has put her own twist on it with embroidery. But apart from it, she kept the sort of simplicity of these tops, which works really well. Um, and you can see, I think she's kept, I'm gonna slightly closer, I think she's probably kept exactly the same width, it looks like, so she's probably followed the tutorial exactly, so you can see that's a really nice outcome. And then Dolphin is saying, what a lovely top on the mannequin. That's a fantastic introduction to the next one, which is of course the Tunic. Originally, when I planned this summer draft and so along, I was only going to do this blouse because I know it's a very straightforward method, and I also know because the amount of gathers we're using in the volume allows for a lot of adaptation for different body shapes. And of course, if you do too much fiddling like I did or Astrid, then you might run into problems. But this is a very fail-safe garment to make, which is why it's been made, been chosen, because it's really comfortable to wear and has lots of volume, which means you can be a lot more well endowed, for example, than I am, and it still be fit, or you can have less and it will fit as well. You can have different arm shapes, different shoulder shapes, and the fabric will drape around. The other one, the Tunic, lots of you loved because it's quite a simplistic garment and really clever how it's made out of flats and only rectangles and one square. But of course, because it is flat on the body, it's basically a boxy top, it has more fitting issues, because if you compare this made of rectangles and there isn't a single angle, and of course compared to our bodice block where you can see we've got angle there, we've got curve here, we've got angles, we've got darts. Even, you know, if you make something straight, if you're bigger busted, we will still keep the bust dart because otherwise it doesn't fit. So this is where this one is a little bit more tricky and has more limitations than this blouse. This blouse, I think, probably will work in 95% of the cases. If you do exactly the tutorial I shared, it will work. And you can get away with quite a lot of fiddling and it will still look nice. But with this one, of course, because you're working on the flat, there's a bit more, you run into issues quicker because you haven't got as much room. I'm going to pop this on, and so you can see how original was, and then I'm also going to pop this on. So this is the original. I've had this for over 20 years. I even got it from my mother, actually, in which case it's from the 70s, or I think I might have bought it when I was a teenager. So this is actually, I think it's a little bit oversized for me. So I used to love it when I was young, but nowadays I normally wear a sleeve rolled up, and it's sort of a really nice high summer throw on. Again, this would work really nice as a dress and as a tunic at the moment. So it sort of covers you up, and it's got really nice relaxed style. However, as you might have noticed, I'm quite small busted, so, and I'm also quite squared shouldered. So my bodice, if I buy any pattern or if I use a commercial bodice block, my shoulders have to be squared up. Therefore, a pattern like this, which is literally a rectangle, works really well. However, for example, if you have slightly more sloping shoulders and a big bust, then you're going to run into problems because you're going to get lots of drag lines, strain lines. You will probably have to make it bigger as well to accommodate your bust in comparison to your, to your chest, because this is just one rectangle. So your proportions are going to be slightly harder to get right, just because for this one, the volume, we're only going to fit it around here, and the rest is gathers in volume, so it just drapes her on her body recently, um, easily. This one, this is sort of the hybrid between just putting it rectangles and being really oversized or just squares to a fully fitted bodice block. And because it is a hybrid, it's the in-between step, you start getting fitting issues, and it might not work for anybody. And one of those was Susanna. She tried it a few times, and she said because of the proportions, the bust shape, the body shape, it just didn't work for her. So what she did in the end, I'm going to show you. She made a really beautiful conventional blouse which worked perfectly. And I think that's something really important to take as well. And when you're trying out something new like that, whether it's just me or like a vintage tutorial you find, or a YouTube tutorial, always think about, yeah, this looks really different to maybe a commercial pattern I've worked, which works really well, or it looks really different to my block, and then make a trial and see. It might work, it might be really beautiful and unusual, but it also might not work. And it's sort of trusting yourself and thinking, yeah, I tried it, it didn't work, is it worth trying to fix it, or am I actually better off going to something I know and which fits me really well, rather than, trying to change the shoulder and stuff like that. And Suzanne says it was really frustrating. All the volume was always under the armhole, no matter how I made adjustments. Yeah, and I think it is the problem here, because of course, can you see, this looks fine. I've got my hands up, and when I've got down, you can see even I got drag marks here. And of course, this is incredibly thin fabric, so I've got volume here, excess, but because it's so thin, it just disappears. And of course, if you have it like this, it just, it looks nice. If I stand like that, you can actually see the fold of this garment where it falls short. And of course, if you're using a thinner fabric, Susanna was using bed sheets for her trial, then it becomes really noticeable that there is too much fabric. And then again, if you have, for example, a bigger bust that over measurements needs to be bigger, because you, of course, up here you're going from your shoulder, but if your bust is bigger, then you need to add more, when of course the volume is really underneath here. So it's sort of, because of where we add volume, it might end up in the wrong place here rather than here where you need it. So it's really limitations, because you literally just have a straight at the front rather than our wonderful dart, which allows us to do it much. And of course, even with that dart, if you use my tutorial to create a relaxed bodice, or a bodice with extra ease, which are both on the website, or if you use my YouTube tutorials for how to remove a bust dart, even if you remove a bust dart, the body shape still has a shaping. It's just extra ease or volume. But of course, with this method, we are starting with no dart, no shaping. It's just straight. So none of, like, when we convert this into a little bit of ease and slightly wider bodice, the overall fit is still for our 3D body rather than this, which is completely flat. And Heike is saying, I learned already much with fitting with simple blouse. It is interesting to test new ways. Yes, I think simple in the marks are cold. It's quite true, because it isn't actually that simple, because of course we're all round. There's probably not a single straight line in our body. It's all lovely curves, even if they're really subtle. So by using a pattern like this, even how these are straight. So what you might find, for example, that you need to have a slight angle here, in which you could just pinch it out and basically angle it slightly, and that might improve the fit again, because I'm quite straight shouldered. This fits fine, but you might find again that you actually need to reflect the angle here. And if you did that, you're learning already. Your shoulders aren't straight. sloped. And Natalie is saying things can become complicated quite quickly when trying out new designs. Yes, especially a design like that. There, you know, if you're using a commercial sewing pattern, you sort of know this is the, you know, we got a dart, we got a sleeve. This is quite abstract how it's put together, so I think it becomes even more complicated. The same with this one is, I think this is a little bit more conventional to a certain degree, because it's like a gathered blouse. Well, this is, it's basically taking a step back in time from commercial sort of conventional pattern cutting more towards the origins of where it came from. So it's basically undoing all the fitting we've done to get a fit we want. So yes, but these are the limitations really. And I've tried before, I think I've done a live about, do patterns actually work with sort of one piece drawn patterns you see online? And I think most of them, again, sort of work if they're not shaped or anything, but as soon as you shape stuff, you're going to run into issues. And this is the same thing, but it works for me because it's quite loose and because I've got the body shape probably for it. It's also quite a unisex garment, so it's sort of, by wearing it oversized and not having a bigger bust, is quite a nice, easy, relaxed garment. But it is really limited if you want to have any shaping around the bust area. So apologies. This one is a lot easier. I'm gonna put this on now. And I think also fabric choices, because this, both the one I've used for my samples and this is a very thin wool. And Susanna, she had a really nice wool she wanted to use for autumn blouse, which of course she used. For her design she decided on in the end. So for her trowel she had to use something thicker, which is why it's really important if you trowel in the appropriate fabric, because if you would have made the trowel out of really thin fabric, it might have looked really nice, and then she would have cut into a precious wool, I think it's a wool silk or wool cotton, and then it would have, you know, then you would have really wasted fabrics, which is why troweling in the appropriate fabric is really important if it's a completely new design. With mine, I was lucky because I had the original, so I made a few changes, but it wasn't starting from zero, so I got away with it. And also I think if I made this into something a thicker fabric, I might have faced bigger fitting issues. And Natalie's saying, knowing what styles work with your body comes with experience. Yes, it's sort of, and again, Susanna, I know, has been working for ages, which I think why it was really good at the trial stage. She basically realized it doesn't work for me. And I agree with you, Natalie, her shirt is really lovely. And, you know, actually, Susanna, I'm really glad you didn't give up and just, you know, just I'm going to stop. And instead you actually turned it into something positive and made a shirt you really love. And that's sometimes, you know, we try something new and it works out, but sometimes also really important knowing where to stop and maybe just putting it aside, or actually saying, I sometimes do it where you just say, this has annoyed me so much, it's got so many issues, it's a trial, I'm not going to waste any more time, I'm going to start afresh. And it's a really sensible and healthy thing to do, rather than sort of there comes a point where you just past it, there's so many issues, but you're actually better off starting with something you know works better, rather than wasting more time. And it's quite satisfying when you've done something, it didn't work, you fiddled with it for an hour or more, and just to put it in the bin sometimes. It's really satisfying. I think with trousers sometimes you get it. I've gotten it. So, however, I got lucky. I basically copied the original design. So let me stand up again. And Susanna saying, thanks, I learned. Sorry, I can always never see one. I learned from you, Charlotte. That's very kind, Susanna. Thank you. But also, I know you've got a lot of experience, so you sort of knew it wasn't working. So let's have a look. So what I did, you can probably already see, what I didn't like about the original is that the sleeves were too long to me. So when we drafted it for our own bodies, I basically chose the sleeve length I wanted, and I also chose the length because I wanted this as a top rather than a tunic, because if you know me, you know I like a really high-waisted pair of trousers, and this works well with me. So you can see, actually, you can see, ooh, there are some drag marks here. So actually, but you can see this is, you know, when you see in on online catalogs and it looks really nice, that's what they've been doing in the mirror. They've been moving it exactly so you don't get the drag marks and when you just can't move. So again, you can see when I stand up, it fits perfectly. If I go down, the same as the other one, it's got these drag marks. But it's sort of the blouse there. I need to actually give another iron because can you see here, it's doing a little bit of weird thing. I've already ironed it once, but you can see if I'm sort of standing like that, it's a nice relaxed blouse or tunic now. And interesting, did you notice it dips a little? It dips at the side a bit at the back. And that is again an issue with I haven't got many curves there, but on the original, because it's longer, again it goes down slightly in the side. You can see that here as well. And of course, if you've got a really fitted garment, it always on the block goes up because the way it curves, that creates a straight line. So here, because I haven't got any curves, it's all straight. So can you see it's sort of, because this is shorter and because this is quite a stable band of densely woven fabric, that works quite well because that makes it more stable in it straight. But you can see it starts to dip it down a little bit. But you know, it's one of those things. It's a fun design to try out. It's relaxed, so it's not perfect, but I think this is 90% there. I prefer this version to original because it's more my size rather than oversized. So now I've got the really nice loose sleeves, but I've done it. It was supposed to hit just underneath my elbow. It ended up slightly longer, but it's a nice length. And also, of course, by breaking it up, I think if it was slightly longer, you can see it on that one, then that would make me really wide. By having it slightly shorter, it actually breaks it up. And I think if I had that even a little bit shorter, like that would break it up even more. So it actually works better for me and it's a better fit. And Susanna, Natalie is saying, I love this blouse. Thank you, Natalie. This was the one I didn't want to do because I thought it'd be quite tricky. And this fabric is really loose. So I was like, I'm just doing it because I said I would. But this is actually the one where I was like, oh, I can actually mention wearing it. It's like a really nice, relaxed top. So yes, I love it too, which is always a lovely surprise. There's something you weren't too sure about because the original one I loved when I was younger. I love the idea of it, but I haven't worn it a few times, so a few years. So this is like quite nice to re-energize that style. And Suzanne is saying it looks great on you. Thank you very much. I think this color is fantastic as well. It's like a nice off-white, like a calico, isn't it? It feels really nice and airy. And Heike says, it seems if it's more easy with light white fabric, which patterns are good for old linen sheets. That's really true, Heike. This is like, this looks beautiful because this is this is like a gauze or muslin. It's an offcut of a sari fabric, which of course are heavily draped around your waist and then worn as a scarf. So, and it's a summer version, so it's really lightweight and beautiful. And I think the whole blouse I made it took a ridiculously little amount of fabric. So I think if you make a crop version, I think you can make this style out of 1/2 meter of normal fabric, and less than a yard. So it's a really efficient way of working. And yes, it only works. I think it works because it's quite lightweight. With Suzanne, she used a wool, and a really, really lightweight wool gauze would work as well. But I think a heavier, even a heavier gauze would, I run into problems. Or like a slightly denser wool like Suzanne used. It just hasn't got that drape and softness. And the second part of your question, Heike, about old linen sheets, that might be a really nice, different whole video about how, what you actually can repurpose old linen sheets, because they're so beautiful, but they are actually really dense weave, isn't it? So they don't work for a lot of styles. So we should do that on a separate tutorials, because there's lots of ideas and lots of styles it doesn't work out. I've used it before. I just think it's actually not as easy as it is. And Heike is saying nice neckline. Yes, so if you've followed some of my lives, I really wasn't sure, because this has got the traditional tunic neckline, which I love, but this fabric is sort of in a way really forgiving, because you can force it because it's so loosely woven. But I didn't want to put button stand and a tap in there. I'm thinking like, that's just gonna pull a thread or be slightly wonky, or it also, what happens is sometimes it sort of stretches, and when it bags out, you can steam it beautifully on the other hand, which is good. But therefore I went with a really simple neckline with bias binding. I can take it off and show you properly in a second. And Natalie saying, Charlotte, 95% is good enough. Yes, I agree. I think 95 is what we aim for. And of course, if you're like me and you've bought clothes from shops for years and still do, you sort of realize that with clothes from shops, until you make your own clothes, you get actually really picky about what amazing fitting clothes you can have. And when you go into shops and you try things on, you just think like 10 years ago I would have been really happy with it. Now all I can see is like that the back doesn't fit, the armhole is awful, the sleeve is awful. So I think, when we're saying 95% of handmade clothes, they're already far superior to most of the clothes you see in shop, unless of course it's a knitted t-shirt or a knitted garment where the stretch does all the fitting. But yeah, I think being lucky for, well, having the body to fit this pattern in this case, because for other styles it's harder, but you can see it works. But you can also see, even if I had a little bit more bust, it would cause issues. Even, can you see how it moves up? So it would be wonky. And then of course, if I had needed more volume there, I would have to add it at the side, because the shoulder defines how wide it is, and then it would start distorting, as Heike says. And of course, if you're curvier, your back is still flat. So with a style like that, where the back and the front is, it doesn't work. So it was just its limitations of the pattern and fabrics, how to make it work, what body shapes it works for. And Astra is saying, it's a great use of a sari fabric. Beautiful. I wonder if your square shoulders affect the hang in the back. Oh yeah, that could be as well. So I of course can't see my back as well. Yeah, and of course I still have a curve, isn't it? So if I stand straight again, you can sort of see it dips. So yeah, so if I was the shoulders were more sloped, then the dip would be more extreme. And if you're straighter, you can see it looks better in the waist. So it's all these sort of related issues you face with a more unconventional pattern like this. And Dolphin saying, that's a great question, Astrid. The pattern didn't have a drop shoulder. Yes, the pattern is literally a rectangle, isn't it? So it's like the opposite of that, but you sort of slightly extend your shoulder. So I think it basically, I always when I fit a block, you always start the shoulder, because just by slightly moving it up, down, forward, backwards, you have so many like fitting issues resolved further down. So just the angle being slightly too angled or not angled enough, or too tight or not tight enough, creates really big issues later on in lower down in the bodice. So half a centimeter here will create massive drag lines. So even, you know, my shoulders are already straight, but it's still creating issues over a relatively straight part of my body. But of course, as I said before, even our back is all beautiful curves, and um, going in and out. So a flat fabric just will always cause a little bit of an issue. That's why, of course, we have a shoulder dart, which is tiny, but really makes a difference. And Natalie saying it would be a nightmare to sew a tab front in that fabric. Yes, and I was sort of a bit like, because originally I was going to do a sort of fake shawl collar, where you just do a shawl collar from the front, so fold down collar, and then put a tab here. But I said any sort of top stitching, or it's just what sort of any mistake would really stand out. And as it was yesterday, and I had to show you, I didn't want to mess it up too much. So this is a really nice, it's not a compromise, it's a design choice, which is appropriate for my time and fabric. And also what I did as well is I added a little bit extra at the front, so I could create a little bit of volume, which again makes it a little bit looser around the bust area. So it allows me to create a little bit more volume in this area. And that's actually, if you really want to make this and you are a little bit fuller busted, that's the way of actually making it fit better, which is either having a pleat at the front or having little tucks at the front, because that way you can keep the outside shape exactly the same. It just becomes wider in the middle. So that's a way of, in a way, adding shaping, because this is basically a little bit of bust shaping, just through gathers, but it's basically putting a little bit of extra volume in this area, without changing the outer edges of the pattern as such. And I think I mentioned that in the tutorial as well when I made this. I can't remember, sorry, it's been 3 weeks ago. But if you want to do it, if you, for example, made it the toile and you're a bit fuller busted and it's not quite hanging, rather than adding extra to the side, by adding a gathered element like I've done, or a pleated element, or little pin tucks, then you're basically doing a little bit of retro shaping. For me, it was more because I wanted it looser as well for myself. Susanna is saying, nowadays I only look for ideas in clothing stores. I hardly buy anything but underwear. Yes, I'm the same. Socks, tights, underwear and knitwear. I think, Suzanne, you can knit. I can't knit, so I do like a little bit of fully fashioned knitwear, jumpers and such. But yeah, I think clothes shops are great for looking at fabric choices, design details. But with a lot of garments, once you've made your own, you realize how badly most garments fit. It's always amazing. I've got one pair of board jeans which fit perfectly. I think that's like the only pair of sort of board trousers I still have which fit perfectly, which was a complete fluke. But a lot of the time it's just very hard once you know how it should fit. And Natalie is saying, I love the pin tucks and dolphin as well. Thank you. Yes, so actually I was inspired by the Georgia O'Keeffe a little bit, which we did years ago. She used a lot of pin tucks, and it's a little vintage detail. And pin tucks, it looks wonky, doesn't it? I'm sort of being slightly, I don't think it is, because maybe I'm wonky, because I actually did it exactly at the center front. That's a bit better. which is why I can't look at myself on the screen because I get paranoid. Um, but yes, that's a really nice detail. It's and a pin tucks are actually because you fold the fabric and you stitch it in the sewing machine with and you use your sewing machine foot as a guide. They're actually really easy on soft fabrics like that. And I filmed myself making it. So I'm going to put a little short out on how to do this on a soft fabric like that to get them, because the only tricky thing, of course, is getting them parallel. But otherwise, they're really nice detail, an easy detail to use, which of course why they're used quite a lot on vintage sort of underwear and blouses, because they distribute volume, but they control it, so it's a lot more subtle like that. But you still in a way get a little bit of shaping. So there's a lot of sort of old slip dresses and stuff. You could often have little pin tucks instead of darts, and of course it also means you don't have one stitched thing. You have like lots of little one, so it's easily and nicely distributed. So very really nice detail. Take a little bit of time to make, but you know it's a design then rather than a dart, which is purely functional. Doesn't have to be, but sometimes is. Anyway, so these are my two blouses, and of course your lovely blouses. Thank you so much again for sharing them with me. I really loved seeing your different ideas, and also like the issues came across from Astrid to Suzanne to myself, and the joy of making clothes, trying out new methods, and also of course the issues it can sometimes create and how we get around it and then still make something in the end. If you are still making it, do please, share it with me, send it to me, and then I can always, if you want to, I would love to share it on my Instagram as well, to sort of, or if you don't want to, I would love to see them just for the sake of it. Anyway, so this is the last summer draft and sew along. So thank you for joining me, maybe just watching, maybe getting some bit more of an understanding of how pattern cutting works, even if you didn't make the garments. And then from next week, I'm going to go back to more generalized, series. I really enjoyed it, so what I might do, this was quite last minute, which is me quite often, but I'm going to try to actually plan one maybe later on in the year or something, where I can prepare you a bit, to give you a bit of time to get fabrics and ideas, and then maybe do something similar again over several weeks. But from next week, it'll be back to more general lives. I'm actually thinking, because Fashion Week is starting in 2 weeks' time, I might do some analysis of what's actually out in the world of fashion on the catwalks for next summer. So that's because, of course, it's going to be showing spring summer 2025, and sort of analyzing, and sort of sometimes a lot of them are quite a lot about show and spectacle, but actually looking at them and saying what will make wearable clothes, what works, what's maybe a little bit questionable, and also how you can use your pattern cutting skills to create your own. And I know if you're like me, it's nice to chat about stuff you see, because not very many people are interested in fashion, and especially in the making and the pattern cutting. So it'll be a nice way to look at different garments, see what we think, how we can, make our own sort of interpretation of it. And I could see I've got one last question from Natalie. So did you add extra fabric into the neckline to create the pin tucks? Yes, I did. So I had the same pattern piece to the front and the back, just with different necklines. And then what I did, I actually just extended my center front by 2 centimeters, which gave me 4 centimeters extra width. So when I laid it on the fabric on the fold, I literally just moved it away 2 centimeters, which is just an inch, and that gave me the extra amount of width. And I can't quite remember if I talked about the option. I think I talked about the option of having a pleat on this style, where this was a tap, or like I was gonna do the tap with a pleat. So that was my original plan. And if you do that, you can literally just either add a strip of paper to your pattern, or just move it away parallelly on the folded fabric. And then I just changed my mind because I couldn't quite face stitching a button stand and tab in this fabric. But if you do that, you know, it does actually, Suzanne, that might have been, I know you wanted a different style of blouse or tunic, but adding basically a little bit of pin tucky gathers here, that will help shape around your bust line later on. So if you ever want to revisit that style, Suzanne, that might be an idea. And of course you could also do the same on the shoulder here. So again, you could cut the pattern from the shoulder down at the front, and then add again maybe 2 centimeters, and then again have 3-4 little pin tucks. And again, that will help again shaping around the bust line by keeping the oval shape exactly the same. And again, if you have lots of fitting issues at the back, you could do the same. And you could also, of course, angle the shoulder. But as Suzanne said, you know, at some point you got so many fitting issues. Just make a beautiful shirt from your blocks or pattern rather than trying to fix something. And that's it really. And I'm glad it distracted you in the summer. Astrid, it's lovely to hear. You're very welcome, Heike. And have a lovely weekend too, Suzanne and everybody. Nearly there, which is lovely. And I'm glad you enjoyed it, Natalie. And hello, Jen. No worries about being late. And I don't know whether you made this summer draft in so long or not. I know you're really busy. But lovely to have you along for the ride anyway. But that's it for me for today. I will see you at our usual time, 1:30 next Thursday, for something